Welcome to episode 171 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie. Dalton, it's been a while. It's been like 2.5 months. Is this our longest pod break in multiple years? I feel like it might be.
It is our longest break, and honestly, can you blame us?
Yeah, I was gonna say some dire Super Bowl circumstances may have caused part of that.
Yeah, Super Bowl went so poorly for us as Chiefs fans that I think we just needed some time away from football to think about it.
I think Johnny quit sports altogether for a while. Will Johnny be back on the podcast? Only time will tell.
Having been to his apartment in New York City, I can say his laptop is in storage. It's not even set up. It's just up on a thing, just sitting there by itself.
His PC?
His PC, sorry.
So
full stream setup.
Did he get it fixed?
It doesn't look to be the case. A lot of dust.
Sad deal. But what is not a sad deal, Dalton, is we are at this moment on Tuesday night about 48 hours away from the NFL draft. Obviously, there are a ton of real NFL storylines that many others will talk about. And we'll dive into the subcategory of that, which a lot of people will still talk about. And that is the fantasy football storylines that come with the NFL draft. And we've talked about this class like in passing a little bit throughout the year. We've made references to the running back class coming in or things of that nature. But this, I think, is our chance to dive a little bit deeper, not necessarily on the prospects, although we might talk about some individual prospects here and there, but just on some of the storylines to be watching out for Thursday and the coming days in the draft as well, especially if you're talking about running back. More of them will be in the latter days of the draft, and just kind of what the consequences from some of these things might be in the NFL and, of course, in fantasy football. And I mean, without further ado, I'll just let you jump right into it, Dalton. What is, I don't want to say your number one, because I don't know if it is your most important, but what's your first storyline that you're watching out for?
I mean, I think it is the most important for fantasy football. But where does Ashton Jeanty land?
Yeah.
So
that was my first one too, because that's where, I mean, he's the clear 1-1 in Dynasty rookie drafts. So that is the most interesting thing about it. And what even makes it more interesting is all the reporting is there's not a ton of trade up candidates in the draft right now, and he might be one of them. So we have to even think beyond some of the bad teams in the top 10 that could potentially get their hands on Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's leaving the top 10. I think the Bears are his hard stop at this point. An interesting note just on that, if the Bears think someone's going to snipe him, they have 2 early second-round picks. I could see a package getting them to move up. But a lot of steam is catching right now from the Jacksonville Jaguars, which, in my opinion, could be one of the ideal fantasy environments he would land in those early picks.
You think so?
I do. Compared to, so another popular mock destination, and I don't think anybody knows what to do with them, is the New Orleans Saints. That seems like a terrible floor situation for Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, at least short term. And you know what's fun? I was looking at mocks last night. I haven't seen any Saints mocks for him, and just, I mean, I only looked at 3 or 4, and there's hundreds of mocks out there. But I've seen the Jags. We'll talk about why you like that a lot in just a second. I've seen the Patriots, which, boy, would that be rough for Ramondre Stevenson, and to a lesser extent Ashton Jeanty, but probably more so Ramondre Stevenson if that happened. The Bears are another one where if he does actually fall, he's been mocked there. And the Raiders are another one that I've seen as well. And kind of my first instinct was to make a grossed out face when I thought about him on the Raiders, but it's like, well, I mean, Geno Smith at quarterback, you've got Pete Carroll as the head coach. They're apparently going to run like wide zone concepts in their rushing attack. Not that he couldn't be great in any kind of rushing attack, probably. That he needed to be, because he is a generational prospect. But the Raiders, I still feel like, were my least favorite. Outside of the Patriots are my clear least favorite, but I still do like the Jags more than the Raiders, I think. But why do you like the Jags so much for him and his fantasy value?
It's the closest in the top 10, other than the Bears, that it's a complete offensive unit that I feel comfortable with. There's some question marks on their offensive line, but it's not bottom of the league. Raiders were 31st in rush run blocking last
Mhm.
year, which big concern for me. Always a concern for a team like the Raiders that doesn't have any real premier talent outside of Brock Bowers. Jacoby Myers is a good player. He's not a great,
Mhm.
and the Jaguars have a very competent quarterback that I don't think we've seen fully put it together. And if they take GT early on, that defense has a lot of holes, and there could be a
Yeah.
lot of catch-up games in that offense. Um, and then you add in Liam Cohen, who has he did great things in Tampa Bay with Bucky Irving last year,
Mhm.
and there are worlds difference in the skill between Bucky Irving, who was a 1,300 all-purpose yard player last year, and Ashton Genty.
Yep.
So outside of the Bears and the Jags, those two are the most well-rounded teams in the top 10 that could take it. And then if it were to happen, which I don't think it will, the Cowboys at 12 would be an elite destination for him. But regardless of landing spot, I think he is more than deserving of the 101 without
Yeah.
any question.
Yeah, and the Broncos are a popular trade up team that we've heard, I think, for GT. I don't hate the Jags landing spot just from GT's perspective. From the Jags perspective, I do not understand it. And that's not me saying, "Oh, I'm completely sold on this backfield." Like, why would you like clearly Travis Etienne did not have a good year last year. He had a great year the year before, so I'm not totally sure like what to do with Etienne or what his future even is in Jacksonville. He's got 1 year left on his rookie deal. Obviously, no contract extension to this point. I would be surprised if that happened, but like if they draft Gene, are they really going into the season with all three of those running backs? To me, like it's funny. Tank makes the least amount of sense. Like between he and Travis Etienne, just from a play style standpoint, to be a counter or to be a duo with Gene T, but also Tank has more years left on his rookie deal. So that would just be, from a Jaguars perspective, kind of a messy situation for a team that still has a lot of holes. But I do think it's good to talk about the Jags kind of in this respect too. Gene T is so good to me. And again, I know Etienne had a bad year last year. Tank was one of those guys that like efficiency metrics off the charts, all these like best in the NFL and some metrics. Everybody kind of knows, okay, that's not who it really is, but he still obviously had a way better year last year than the previous year. But there's like no concern about the other guys for me in Jacksonville if he lands there. I think if you went to the Saints in the short term, obviously AK would be a concern, but that would not be a long term concern. And probably the only one where it's like a little bit of a long term thorn in the side of the teams we've kind of talked about would be the Patriots and Ramondre Stevenson. But to me, it would be much more bad news for Ramondre than bad news for Gene T. I mean, this is a guy, Matt Waldman's rookie scouting portfolio. He has him graded as a higher level of talent as a prospect than Bijan Robinson, then Jahmyr Gibbs, then Brees Hall, like all of these guys who are all probably three of the best 8 running backs in the NFL right now. This guy coming out of college has higher marks from Matt Waldman, who is one of the best, especially when it comes to running back scouting specifically. So this is a truly generational prospect, and it almost made me cry a little bit when he got a pre J.K. Dobbins injury comparison from Mr. Matt Waldman.
Yeah, and I think for me, the doomsday scenario is the Saints. And
Yeah,
that's because that franchise seems so bereft of talent that it would be difficult for me to make the argument that he can overcome it. We're talking
yeah,
like Saquon, New York Giants level of bad. Um, Derek Carr might sit out the entire season. They have a right tackle in Trevor Pitting, who is on the last year of his contract. They have a defense that's incredibly aged. They have a cap situation that seems really untenable and seems like they're finally paying for their mismanagement. And when you combine all of those factors and AK still being on the team, I get really concerned about that one. Not enough to not take him 1.1. Never will I not take him 101.
yeah.
But it just makes that the worst situation. The Raiders, up and coming, new leadership. They've signed a franchise quarterback for, I think, 4 years now, 3 years now on the Geno contract. And they have another positional premier talent. The Patriots need offensive weapons, and Drake May, it looks to be a starting caliber NFL quarterback. But yeah, end of the day, if Ginty were to end up at the Saints, that's probably the worst case scenario out of these top 10 picks.
My best case scenario of teams that I can realistically imagine, there could be a trade up from somebody that we're just not talking about or not expecting, and it's hard for me to really put that into context of this conversation here. But my favorite kind of any of the teams that we think is realistic would be Chicago, because I just could not care less about DeAndre Swift being there. It is kind of funny that the reporting is Ben Johnson wants this to be a Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery kind of situation. And it's Jahmyr Gibbs was new DeAndre Swift. Now DeAndre Swift is new Jahmyr Gibbs. It would be funny how that all kind of worked out if that did happen. But I would love it for both Ginty, because I just think it'd be a good situation. They just overhaul the offensive line. Joe Thuney, still a really freaking good guard. You've got Caleb Williams. You've got good weapons at the receiver spot, and you have an offensive mind in Ben Johnson who knows what he's doing and would be able to really leverage those play action situations with a guy like Ginty to just make the offense as a whole that much more deadly, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that the Bears would be the ideal landing spot if for some reason, not saying this will happen, the Niners, he falls to the Niners 11 and they're calling quits on Christian McCaffrey. That could be really interesting.
Did you see the alert today? He's got the all clear. He's good to go. No restrictions.
Good on him. Like I said last season, when you go to Germany, nothing good happens there for medical reasons.
That would be if that would be one where the Niners took him. That would be the one situation where everybody would be like, "Oh, good God! Really? We have him and Christian McCaffrey on the same team. We have to try and figure this out for the next 2 years."
Well, and there also just seem to be a lot of running backs on the market right now for trades, and I think that's representative of this draft class.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a couple guys out there that we can get to actually here in just a minute. We can go into my next storyline here, which is just the depth of this running back class. We've talked about it at times throughout the season, looking at Waldman's reception perceptions. That's Harmon. Looking at Waldman's rookie scouting portfolio, I think he had 24 guys that were graded as starter or starter level quality at running back, which to me seems much higher than the last couple of years that I've been reading it. He did have some good insight, and I won't give it all away on here, but just it doesn't necessarily just because there's 24 of these guys doesn't mean that 14 of them are going to be RB2s or better for fantasy. That's not usually how it works, but if you can get 6 or 7 guys who do that, that's a great class is basically the long and short of it. But there's a lot more details and stats and breakdown in there in his guide if you are interested or if you're going to buy it. But I just think it's interesting because I was looking through other teams last night. Let's just go through it. Let's go through all the teams. How many running backs do we think are safe in a week from now that we're sure are going to still be? We only have to say the number one because there's not that many guys who are the number one. But how many guys do we think are going to be the 1A in their backfield in a week on paper? We can start with the Lions because this one's cheating. Gibbs and Montgomery are they're both 1A to me. One's role isn't that, but the production is that. Put that one off to the side. You were going to say something real quick before we jumped into it, though.
Oh, I was just going to go reverse from draft order on these teams.
That's fine. Yeah, you can read it off. We'll go.
Saquon Barkley is safe.
Yep.
Kansas City, no one is safe. Buffalo,
I think James Cook is safe.
There's a lot of ongoing contract disputes between him and the Bills, but he's also in the last year of his contract.
Yeah.
So I could see them going a running back. Washington, I don't think anyone's safe.
Nope.
Lions safe. Ravens safe. Houston, Joe Mixon's definitely not safe.
Yep, that's why I looked at Mixon. Like my first instinct was I wanted to say he was safe, but I was trying to come at this with like a very pragmatic, like heartless approach, and I don't think Joe Mixon is safe. I agree with you.
Rams, I don't know if Kyron is safe.
You know, it's funny. I made my own list last night. I did have Kyron Williams on that list, but he's the one that I put ... I think like he's the one I'm most unsure about, and it's not necessarily like a skill issue with him. It's just that the Rams keep finding themselves in these situations the last 2 years where he's the only guy on the team who can really do anything at the running back position. And he also has some major ball security concerns. And you could argue that's the reason why they weren't in the Super Bowl. And who knows, maybe winning the Super Bowl last year without the Eagles-Chiefs game turned out was Kyron Williams had a very crucial fumble in that playoff game. And that has kind of been a trend. I will still give Kyron a safe, but whether it's Blake Corum year 2 or if it's just they draft another running back and like he's not safe as the clear number 1, but I still think 1A, you have to kind of give it to him.
Well, just like James Cook, he's on the last year of his contract.
Is he really already?
Yes.
I guess he didn't do anything his rookie year, so that's why it feels like it went so much quicker.
Going up the list, Minnesota, they have 2 running backs in that room. They have a lot of picks, or they don't have a lot of picks. So I'm going to call them safe unless they trade out of the first round.
Aaron Jones, who else am I missing in their room?
Newly acquired Jordan Mason.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I guess Aaron Jones is probably safe just by virtue of team situation. However, if you're just talking by virtue of age and skill, not that Aaron Jones isn't good, but could the Vikings get somebody in the 5th or 6th round that in week 10 is 50-50 with Aaron Jones? Like, I think that's very possible. Not probable, but possible in this class.
Green Bay, I think Jacobs is safe.
Yep. I'm glad we can agree on that.
Chargers, I don't think Najee Harris is safe.
I agree.
Pittsburgh, I don't think Jalen Warren, they want to be their standalone back. So
no, they're definitely going to draft somebody else. Now, if they take Amari Hampton or whoever in the first round, I think that would be dumb because they're kind of in a pick deficit themselves.
But a Jarquez Hunter, a player like that, a 5th round.
Yeah, and if they did that, I do think Warren would be the 1A, but they will need to bring at least somebody else in. But because we don't know how high they're going to draft somebody, we can't say Warren is safe for that 1A role at this point. It's very possible he could have the same role he's had the last couple of years this year again.
Broncos, that running back room is dead on arrival.
Yeah.
The Bucs, I think they're relatively safe.
I think Bucky Irving is safe. They could bring in somebody else, but I think Bucky Irving is safe.
Seattle's safe, but trade rumors out today. Trying to trade Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. That's from Ricky.
Really? Yes. Oh, really? Oh, so really legitimate source then.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that sarcastically.
Yeah. He said they're both on the market. They're trying to move one. So we'll see what goes on there. The Bengals, I think Chase Brown is safe. They're going to take someone. They do not want him playing 100% of their snaps like he did in the season.
And on our co-list, I'll give you Chase Brown, but he was not on my original list. But he was one that he was in the Kyron Williams of I thought really hard about it.
I think our expectations have to come back down on him. He's just not going to be 100% snap player. Yeah. Arizona, James Conner is safe. Age concerns. It'll probably be a 1A, 1B situation. Atlanta, Bijan safe.
Yep.
Indy, JT safe. Miami, I could see them bringing someone else in, but I think Achane has that backfilled.
Achane's kind of like the Jahmyr Gibbs, like I'm gonna cheat just to put him on this list, that sort of deal. They should bring in somebody else though. Still,
yes. Dallas, I think Javante's cooked.
Yeah,
I don't know who will cook him, but someone's going to. San Francisco,
not that hard to cook.
CMC is safe. They'll probably draft running back anyways, and then he'll play twice in one season.
Yeah, they'll definitely
30 points.
They'll definitely draft a guy, and then they'll sign a guy, and the guy they assign will be better. But I mean, Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason both out the door, so it's pretty barren behind older injury-prone Christian McCaffrey right now.
Bears.
No.
Swift is done.
Yep.
Saints, they're going to bring someone in. AK just can't be asked to do it alone. Carolina.
But this is interesting. So he can't be asked to do it alone. But if you had to bet in a week, are we still feeling pretty confident that AK is going to be the 1A in this backfield the whole season?
The Saints have the most picks they've had in a draft since 2017. And I feel like they need a franchise-changing draft. And Kellen Moore runs a lot of RPOs. And it really feels like they're going to want their guy in that offense to lead that backfield. I think I'll still feel he's the 1A. But if they get somebody like a Travion Henderson, I'm a little more concerned. Somebody who can split that pass role with AK, and he becomes more of a situational player, and that age cliff finally hits him, which we've been expecting for a couple seasons. But I think I still feel good about where he's at.
Yeah, I'll put AK on this list, but he's one that's on a little bit shakier ground, I think. Okay, keep going here.
The Panthers.
I don't think Chuba's safe. As much as I like him, and as much as I like the season he had last year.
Well, Chuba and old boy out of Dallas, Rico Dowdle.
Oh, yeah, I forgot Rico Dowdle went there.
I don't think they're safe. This one would be the most annoying place for a really good running back to dump because next year there's going to be Jonathan Brooks is back.
Yep.
And then it's going to be a really weird running back room to figure out.
The Panthers, it just feels like the Panthers are destined for it was Chuba Hubbard all along for like the next 3 years, no matter what they do in the running back room. and to be fair, Chuba was so much better last year than he had been previously in his career. So he's a guy that if he's the lead guy going forward, it won't be because the rest of the team sucks. It will be because he's actually legitimately pretty good, which is different than what we thought of him a year ago, I'd say.
The Jets.
I mean,
Breece Hall safe.
For as much of the weirdness that went on Twitter a couple weeks ago,
Breece Hall, some weird stuff over there, but I think he's safe.
Breece should be safe.
Raiders, no. They're getting a running back, and that's going to be the guy, whether it's one of Pete Carroll's boys at Ohio State or somebody else.
Yeah.
Jacksonville,
no.
Etienne's just coming on the last year of his contract. New leadership regime. They'll bring somebody in, whether it's going to be the 1B to Etienne. I'm still not a tank believer, or it's their new running backfield.
Yeah, I agree.
Patriots.
I mean, you can't say Ramondre is safe because we're seeing Jinky mock to them so much. So we have to leave him off the list.
Well, and we saw last year how that coaching staff felt about Ramondre. He fumbled.
That's very true.
Much.
Yeah.
New York. No, these guys aren't safe.
I like Tyrone Tracy. I think he's good. I think at worst he'll be the 1B to someone's 1A, unless it's like Ashton Jeanty is a New York Giant next time we talk. But I do think there is, like, the Giants are going to bring in somebody. And it does not have to be a first or even second round pick for that somebody to be as good or better than Ty Tracy, who was a 5th or 6th round pick last year in a much worse running back draft.
Cleveland, sneaky destination for a running back to land. In all honesty, good spot. And no, Jerome Ford is not safe. I think it's Jerome Ford.
Yeah,
I don't know who else is there.
Nick Chubb is still a free agent, so he's not back there. Maybe he will go back there if moves in the draft lead them that way. I feel like that could happen. So basically, we're at about half the league.
And then Tennessee, I actually do think they're safe as a tandem, but I'm not feeling great. I think Tennessee is just probably not. They have more needs, and they don't have that 3rd round pick, so running back for them could be a little more difficult.
I do agree, but also if they drafted somebody, like they are not guys who are good enough for me to say they fall into the. I think situationally they're safe, but just from a skill standpoint, I would not feel quite so strongly. So we're at about half the league. So that just gives you an idea of the potential turnover and change we could still see in the running back room. And again, that's not even accounting for Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins, who are both still floating out there, who, I mean, Chubb, a little bit less interesting maybe than Dobbins, although I don't know. Chubb barely got back at the end of last year, so I'm not sure what he'll look like next year. Dobbins was legitimately good to begin the season, and then even after he came back from his injury, he was pretty good in the team's last couple of games. I think they're both pretty clearly waiting out the draft and looking to sign in a place that needs them the most. But those guys are also, I mean, like, if one of those guys ended up, I don't know, in Minnesota, then all of a sudden, like, Aaron Jones, a lot less, like, you know, like there's a lot of unknown at the running back position is the bottom line.
Yeah. And I mean, that leads me into my next storyline, which is, where is the second round run going to go? Because there's going to be a run on running backs in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of these shakeups are going to go. We know Marion Hampton's going to probably go first round. We know GT is going to go first round. Sounds like Travion Henderson could sneak into the first round. But outside of those three, you have players like Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, blanking on the entire class. Throw me a layup here.
Scatterbo. I was going to say Scatterbo, Devin Neal, Giddens from Kansas State.
You just have a lot of guys that some of them are going to go in a second round run. And when that starts, it's going to kind of dictate how these backfields play out, which that's what I'll be most excited to see on day 2 and to see where these teams land up. Because obviously, second round draft capital on a running back is a lot of money to spend on those running backs and would be really indicative to how they feel about their current backfields.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the beast right now. Oh, Dylan Sampson. I like him. I'm not sure how I could forget. Jordan James, RJ Harvey, Trevor Etienne, Travis's little brother. These are all guys ranked ahead of a lot of the guys that we just mentioned by The Athletic too. Caleb Johnson, RB3, is interesting to me. And he's actually a storyline completely unto himself for me, because I think he's the most scheme-dependent running back in the draft. He's the guy that people have identified as you are outside zone, wide zone running back, and you do not need to be going to a team that does not do that. And I'd have to think, if we know that, the NFL knows that. However, all it would take is one team to say, oh, we like him in XYZ scheme, or, oh, we like the Raiders, who haven't run this scheme in the past, but are now, like, they draft him, doesn't work out, and they change it up. Or maybe they do draft him and it does work out fantastically. Like I mentioned, I would love to see Miami draft somebody else. Like I would love to see him go to Miami and be kind of the Montgomery Gibbs of the AFC in Miami, because I think that would be an excellent fit. I mean, the like axis of skill guys that Waldman gives him is like a Todd Gurley, Joe Mixon, Latavius Murray. And he says, like, don't get carried away with the top two names. Like the production's not going to be that, but that just gives you an idea of like the attributes that this guy has. Good vision, good power, one cut runner, all of those things, but very little pass production to speak of, both as a blocker and as a receiver. The receiver part, how much of that is Iowa football? Hard for me to say, sitting where I am. The pass blocking sounds like it is legitimately bad, and that is, of course, how you get on the field in those situations. So he feels like a guy that is going to be a very interesting one to follow throughout the drafts, because if he lands, I'll just say, if where he lands is really going to impact how I feel about him post-draft.
I will say on the pass blocking, it's a bit of my bugaboo. It's the problem with almost every college back at this point. It's just not, the college game doesn't require a lot of backs to block. Mm-hmm. And so it's always a factor put in with all of these running backs. Where it becomes important is when they land in rooms they need to prove themselves in. An example of somebody that we thought was a bad pass blocker was Chase Brown, who he got significantly better last season, second year in the league. Obviously, he popped big for people who drafted him last year. The other concern with Caleb Johnson, his testing didn't come out as good as it was supposed to be. This was a guy that was like competing for the RB2 spot with Marion Hampton for a while. We'll see how the testing comes up. I will say there's not a lot, but if you watch the passes he was thrown at Iowa, he's a pretty good pass catching back. There's one I can think of where he catches it behind his body with one arm and turns it upfield. So he's the player I'm really interested to see in the NFL. And if he lands in a wide zone concept that fits his scheme, he's going to be a pretty electric player. And it seems like he was the hot topic on Twitter in January, which you don't want to be, because now that we're in April and draft season, he's not the topic anymore. Same thing with Bishal Tootin out of Virginia Tech. He was the hot topic, and now he's gone.
Yeah. Real quick, we do have someone in the chat, Nicole Polanco. What do y'all think is Darnell Mooney's fantasy value? Dalton, wide receiver 4. Does that sound right? Like between 36 and 48 if you were doing ranks?
Yeah, I'd put him about there. Talked about this a bit last year. He had a really good fit with Kirk Cousins, with Kirk's ability to throw really accurate intermediate balls. And I don't know if we've seen enough out of Michael Penix to do that. And the Falcons are a team that could take a wide receiver in round 2 or 3 that could challenge Darnell Mooney's value. So wide receiver 4 right now at the moment, I could see him eking into wide receiver 3 territory if Michael Penix comes out and has a good season, but that's probably close to his ceiling.
Yep. Okay. What's your next storyline?
I think it's what draft day trades we see. So one really head scratching thing that I'm still trying to get my mind around. What are the Steelers doing with George Pickens?
Yeah.
And he's on the last year of his contract. They signed a player who plays the exact same game. They traded for a player and then signed him to a $70 million deal. And
also we still don't know for sure if Aaron Rodgers will be their quarterback or not.
Yeah, don't want to think about that. So there's already a lot of talk that there's going to be some trades in this draft. And what players are we seeing getting moved? And then just more importantly, I really want to focus on the Steelers here, not just the trades in general. Like, what is the Steelers' offensive plan going into 2025? And this draft is going to tell us a lot about it. They don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
They have Najee Harris. Jalen Warren in that backfield. That's about it. They don't have many ancillary pass catching options outside of Pat Freiermuth. We didn't see anything out of Russell Wilson last season. Yep. So the Steelers draft, it's going to shape their offense, and it's really going to be indicative to me of how that Arthur Smith run offense is going to go into the season. But this is the first time in a long time that I've had more questions about that offensive environment than I have.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the running back room, like if they draft somebody in the 6th round who we think is like just fine, like a good backup who can handle some touches, all of a sudden Jalen Warren is a top 15 fantasy running back. If they draft Omarion Hampton, Jalen Warren is probably like RB 25, kind of where he has been the last couple of years. And then, DK Metcalf, what's his value this year? Like, can he and George Pickens coexist in an actual healthy offense? Because those two guys, neither one of them does a lot of the underneath stuff that you also need to have done. Now, what both those guys do is they open up the underneath stuff for other guys. So maybe they can make life easy enough for a Roman Wilson. I'm blanking on the other kid's name. That's a year young. Yeah, Calvin Austin. Maybe those two are enough and they don't draft any offensive weapons. But there are a lot. So the way I've seen this receiver class kind of described, and I'll get to this in my last storyline. Actually, I can just go into it right now. It'll be better if I just go into it right now. It's just where's the value in wide receiver this year? And I think what I've seen people talk about a lot is there's not probably going to be many, if any, guys who you look at in 3-4 years and we're seeing like top 12 seasons for fantasy, like wide receiver ones in offenses. There are a lot of guys who can be plug and play wide receiver 2s and good wide receiver 3s in this class. And so like you look at that from a Steelers perspective, there are a lot of guys who they can bring in who could be contributors probably above what they have behind their top 2 guys. And of course, with Pat Freiermuth factoring in there as well.
Yeah. Well, The wide receiver class in this draft, one, it's already unfortunately been typecast by the fans community as bad. Um, your top headlining prospect is Travis Hunter, who's going to be a nightmare until we see the first game he plays it in the NFL and we know what he's playing. Then you have, Matthew Golden, who has next to none when it comes to college production, but seems to be an early round pick. You have Ted McMillan, whose best comp is probably like a T. Higgins, Mike Evans type player. The problem is his arms are so much shorter than both Mike Evans and T. Higgins. And when you have that wide receiver that doesn't create space, that wins on jump and contested catches, it's a little concerning to know that his catch radius is smaller. You have Emeka Abuka, who seems to be a really good slot player, but there's some talks about him playing outside depending on where he lands for NFL teams.
He needs to be like used like Amon-Ra St. Brown is used.
Yes.
And that is, you have to have a very specific type of offense to make that work out if that's your top guy. If that's your second guy, that's a little bit of a different story.
So they have really good role players in this draft who could have good fantasy seasons for you, but it's going to be hard to parse that value out. Then you have Luther Burden, who seems to have major character concerns, seems to have taken plays off at Missouri his last season, didn't produce as well, but has an insane force miss tackle rate.
There are people, like I know you've seen this, JJ Zacharias, and like he gets the Brandon Ayuk comp.
Yeah. Well, I've seen Debo comps to him as well.
Yeah.
He's faster Debo.
Great. He's great after the catch.
And so it's going to be a difficult draft class. For the running backs, I feel pretty confident just saying you're going to draft some of these guys and they might not do anything their first year, but you're going to want to hold them. For the wide receiver class, it's going to be a lot more important for where these players land up. And you add in probably the two pass catchers that are most exciting are Colston Loveland and Tyler Loren and the tight end room. So when you put all that together, it's just, I'm not sure where the value is going to come from in this draft. And it's going to be a really important draft to look at their landing spots and where these players fit and how their skills help their quarterback rooms that they're walking into.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why it's seen as a weak draft is like you said, Travis Hunter, we just don't know. If he were playing receiver only, it'd be different. And I'll talk about that to cap off the show here in a minute. Ted McMillan has not turned into kind of a can't miss guy at the top like people were typecasting a year ago. Kind of with you on Golden, like he's a bit of a projection, I think, at this point. And you just look right now, The Athletic, I think Dane has 3 receivers mocked in the first round. I mean, think about how much different that is from the last couple of years. Like you get 4, 5, 6 receivers these last couple of years in the first round. Luther Burden, who some people have as the top guy in the class, he has going in the second round. So not one of those first round guys. That speaks to those character concerns. What I do think is once you get to days 2 and 3, I think it's really flat. And I think there's a lot of guys, like I like Jalen Noel a lot. I like, is it Beck from TCU? Yeah, Jack Beck. I like Jack Beck a lot too. I've seen Keenan Allen, Puka Nacua comps, like how he plays.
Higgins out of Iowa State as well.
I like him, although I do like Noel better. A Christian Kirk comp is kind of what I've seen for him. I like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of really nice values just thinking about rookie drafts if you can find the right receivers in that second or third round range. And I think just as you're thinking about that versus running back, because I mean, Dalton, you and I both agree the way that we play dynasty fantasy football is we're looking to stack receivers more so in rookie drafts than running backs. Now, if you're a contender, it's a little bit different. But if you are on the come up or you're in a full rebuild, receiver is generally the safer bet. I think I maybe a little bit more than you am just more so first, best available. But I do still lean receiver in those circumstances. If it's close, tie goes to the receiver, tie goes to the pass catcher. If you're a contender, it's a little bit different. But with the amount of running backs, like there's like Caleb Johnson, he could easily be a 4th-round pick. Are we picking a 4th-round running back in the 1st round? Maybe so, but that's not how rookie drafts have generally gone since I've played Dynasty. So I'm just very interested how all of that will work out. And it might be you could get a 3rd-round receiver in the 3rd round of your Dynasty draft because of the influx of running back and the perception of this receiver class. And I think a lot of times the perception of a class, of a position group, is reflective of what people think of the top, not what people think of the entirety of the group.
Yeah. Well, and there's even fun scenario I'll throw out to you. Ravens don't have a lot of holes. We said Derrick Henry was safe. They take Travion Henderson, the back end of the 1st round. Where do you take Travion Henderson in your rookie draft? I mean, and you could have a player like Luther Burden.
It's also not just there. Like Keaton Mitchell just came back from injury to end last season. I think he is legitimately a pretty solid player. So, I think Henderson is better, but it would be a crowded situation for Henderson or anybody if they got taken there for sure.
But you could have the Chiefs taking Luther Burden.
Yeah.
That's a mess of a receiver room for fantasy football at that point between Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and now Luther Burden.
And then that's without even accounting for Travis Kelce and Noah Gray.
yeah, not even accounting for the other pass catching options. But I do agree with you. This class gets really flat, and it's really just a matter of who becomes the best fit. Another, like the Seahawks probably need a 3rd wide receiver.
Yeah.
But depending on who they take.
They need a 2nd wide receiver. Who's their 2nd wide receiver?
Cooper Kupp.
Oh, yeah, they signed Cooper Kupp. Actually, they still need a 2nd wide receiver. My point still stands.
But if they take Amika, you have a lot of overlapping concerns between Amika, Cooper Kupp, and JSN, and who does what in that offense. So it's going to be super interesting for that. And then like a real dark horse situation brewing is Isaiah Bond, who raw talent is a top 5 wide receiver in this class for a lot of people. Just not a good off the field guy.
Just turned himself in to get arrested last week. His reception perception chart dropped like either right before or right after that happened. I'll just say he does not seem like, if you're comparing him to Jermaine Burton, if you're just going on the field stuff, is like a top 15 receiver for Harmon in the last 4 years. Bond is not that. His numbers are actually they're not very good in my opinion. He's not a guy that I am super interested in on the field and especially off the field.
That's interesting. I know Waldman has him pretty high. But yeah, that's another hairball situation. And what I don't like happening is I've seen some of the fantasy community saying it's like your gold at the end of the rainbow with the Tyreek Hill situation where he became a 5th-round pick because of off-the-field concerns. I don't think Isaiah Bond is that. I also
no, and again, like Jermaine Burton, I guess there's still time, but for right now, seems really bad. Seems like it's not going to work out. So that is always in the range of outcomes. Like the discounts don't just come, like these aren't just storylines that just exist to push guys' draft value down. Like these are in most cases real, legitimate concerns. Sometimes they're overblown. Sometimes guys overcome them. Other times they are legitimate reasons that derail guys' careers.
No. Well, the worst part about both him, Golden, and last year Xavier Worthy is evaluating, and Adonai Mitchell, is evaluating those Texas receivers is infuriating between Quinn Ewers and the widespread they run in that shotgun formation. So all of those guys are a grab bag of goodies, and you don't know who's going to do what.
I think Harmon started off one of those Texas guys profiles this year with, I am not a fan of the Texas offense. Just going to get that out of the way right now. So you're far from alone there. Okay, Dalton, you have one more storyline left, correct?
I do.
Okay, let's hear it.
I did have one on here, but it's not worth it anymore, which is aging running backs losing their spot. I'll skip the Hunter one because I know your last one's going to be Hunter. But let's just talk about this quarterback class. And
do we have to?
We do. Because there's a lot of QB needy teams. There's not a lot of good QBs in this class.
Yeah.
Allegedly. And like, where do they land? So Cam Ward, we know where he's going. He's going to Tennessee. How do
Yeah.
we feel about that for his fantasy value? Shadur Sanders is at an all-time.
Is he gonna go in the first round?
Yeah, Jackson Dart, Tyler Show, and then the wild card of all of this is how do people feel about Jalen Milrow?
Yeah,
Where I've
and
seen
he's the one that I am most interested in.
he is, but then I read a scouting report on him that was like, I tried to, the guy says I try to do 20% bad, 80% good. This is the first time I've written 70% bad and 30% good. But Jalen Milrow is the toolsiest, most fun quarterback in this cycle.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that I would bet on him like truly succeeding, but I just don't think anybody in this class really has it. And so if you're gonna make me care about a quarterback, I'll care about the guy that the tools are at least there for him to be a legit guy in the NFL. Whereas, like, I just don't think a lot of these other guys that exist.
Well, this is really where I want to talk about Shadur and Dart because a popular destination for them has been the Steelers at 21.
Yeah.
And just going back to our Pickens Metcalf conversation, those players do not fit that profile for that offense, which is a heavy play action, deep ball setup offense that Arthur Smith is like to run. Shadur Sanders is an accurate passer and doesn't have an arm. And Jackson Dart is in the same boat. He's a very accurate passer. He's a little more better down the field. But if the Steelers take two of those players, I mean, that is a full hands up situation where I don't know how I'm going to evaluate that pass catching core. And I'm probably going to take a lot of Pat Freiermuth.
Jalen Warren, check down city.
Yeah. So, I mean, this quarterback class is bad. The Giants look like they're punting on it entirely and running the Russell Wilson Jameis experiment.
And that tells you where this class is at. Like, that's what you need to really know right there. The Giants, who, like, no one's needed a quarterback worse than the Giants need a quarterback. And they're probably not.
Well, Cleveland's do the same thing.
That too. But I mean, when the strength isn't there, and there are legit guys at 2 and 3 if Ward goes 1 who are worth taking at 2 and 3, which can lead me into Travis Hunter. I think the main thing I'm interested in, because we know the talk, we know what he said, that, you know, if a team's going to take me and not use me on both sides, like I'm not playing for that team, you know, whatever. Like, that's what he said. It sounds like the vibe I'm getting is there's not really been pushback to that. Teams are going to give him the chance on both sides of the ball. What we don't know, like, have you heard anything that tells you, okay, I feel like this guy is going to be a cornerback first, then a wide receiver, or vice versa? I feel like probably cornerback, but I don't know. I don't know if I've seen anything that tells me if there's going to be one focus for him, or if it's going to be truly 50-50, or what that is going to look like.
Well, let's just start with the problem. If you go back and you watch Colorado, he was in the defensive team meetings, not the offensive meetings. And when he gets on the field, they're calling the plays to him from the sideline to the field, which it's made it hard for some people to evaluate because he was told what route to run on what play, and he would run the route, and he did it really well. Obviously, he was really great. He won the Blake Lukoff Award for a reason.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so the counter to that would be his reception perception scores 92nd, 97th, and 97th percentiles, which, to give just context for that, those blow Malik Neighbors out of the water from last year. And Malik Neighbors was awesome in that cut coming out of college. And Harmon has him grade as his third highest receiver, just if you're grading him as a receiver in the last 4 years, behind, I believe it's Chase and Marvin Harrison Jr. His man-to-man score is best ever for a prospect, ahead of Chris Olave and Devontae Smith. He's just behind Calvin Ridley against zone. Like, he's legitimately one of the best receivers we've seen in the last 5 years coming out of college.
The problem is you will not play on a functioning NFL offense without being in those team meetings. They can't call your plays to you on the sideline and get you where you need to be. And you have to develop rapport with your quarterback. And if you're in those defensive team meetings, you can't. On the other side of it, I just think the NFL is an offensive first league, and it would be wild for a team to take their best offensive weapon and let him be their best defensive weapon. Especially if he ends up in the Patriots. Does a Christian Gonzalez, Travis Hunter quarterback tandem sound great? Yes. Does a Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Kendrick Bourne wide receiver room sound exciting on the other side? Absolutely not.
Yeah. I hear you. This is a guy, though, that played 100 snaps a game in college and did it quite well. So I understand the concerns, especially offensively. I am just going to leave the door open that he's just that special that he'll just figure it out. Honestly, what I am most interested in, though, whoever drafts him, it seems like probably Cleveland right now. I mean, apparently they're taking calls for 2, but right now they're 2. I would imagine they're taking him if they're staying there. Whoever takes him, I'm going to be going and finding one of their beat reporters and just following the quotes from the GM and coach that night. I just want to get a sense of what is the team that drafts Travis Hunter? What's their plan? Somebody please ask, is he a receiver first? Is he a cornerback first? Is he doing both 50-50? What meetings will he be in? Because let's be clear, if you just drafted him as a receiver and that's all he was playing, he'd be the second pick in rookie drafts.
You could argue he could be the first pick.
And if Gene T went to a bad landing spot, he could legitimately be argued as the first pick. But it's just such an unknown. I don't know where he's going to go in rookie drafts. Me personally, if I am, let's just say, no picks were traded in the back end of this hypothetical draft. If I'm a contender at 111 and Travis Hunter's on the board, I'm just taking him and I'm just seeing what happens with his career because the upside is way higher than anybody else in that range. And if you're that good, you probably don't need 111 to work out in a real way for you. But it
Weird,
could.
I have 111.
If you're 111 and a contender is
okay, thanks.
And you didn't trade for that pick. But you get what I mean. The upside just at the back end of drafts, if you're one of those teams that is coming into the season, you're going to be the first, second, third best team in your league. I'm just so interested to see what we hear from the team that drafts him, what the plan is for Travis Hunter.
Yeah, but I really don't think he can play both sides of the ball as much as he did in college. I don't think the NFL can game plan that way and still get by. And I really think he should take it on offense because that's where the big money is always going to be.
And that is what makes it really interesting for fantasy drafts, is that he's going to get paid more if he's more impactful as a receiver. But only time will tell. And we can talk about it a little bit more next week or sometime soon when we know the landing spot. That is going to do it for episode 171 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube so you don't miss the live shows at Half Point Per Podcast. The show is available anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, etc. Leave us a 5-star review. Thank you all so much for listening today, and we will talk to you, I don't know about next week, but soon. We'll talk to you soon.